Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this first keynote session for today, where we're going to be taking a look at the secret of e-commerce success in Australia, which I think is probably a topic very close to everybody's heart, and certainly one that has garnered a lot of attention over the last year or so. We've got a really fantastic panel lined up for you today with multiple different perspectives from across the value chain. So we've got payments, we've got logistics, we've got pure play online retailing, and we've got physical and online retailer on board as well. So I think we should have lots of varied perspectives for you. If I can ask our panelists to turn on your video and join me. Just while I'm doing that, a quick reminder that we absolutely want to take your questions during the session. If you pop them into the live discussion box, which you'll find to the bottom right of the screen if you're watching on a desktop or laptop, you can pop your questions in there and we'll get to as many of them as we can during the session. All that remains for me to do is introduce your moderator for this morning's session, Jason Greenwood. He's the founder and lead consultant at Greenwood Consulting. And Jason, I'll hand over to you to take it from here.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate the introduction. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we're really excited to be here. Look, I don't think any of us are so naive to think that we hold the keys collectively to the secret of e-commerce success in Australia. But I think with our combined experience at the coalface, hopefully some of the things we talk about today will be useful and applicable to the audience. So I'll just do a quick introduction of everybody. And as I introduce each panel member, which I'm super excited to be alongside these guys because they know a tremendous amount and they are living in the trenches every single day. So I'll make an introduction and then I'll get each of them to just sort of hold up their hand and give a wave to the audience so that you know exactly who they are when they start speaking. So we've got David Yanovich, and he's the founder and MD of RJ Living. RJ Living is a privately owned Australian e-commerce business founded in 2012. It's based in Melbourne. RJ Living is a leading supplier to the Australian interiors industry with a curated collection of in-house designs from Melbourne. We've also got Zoltan, just make sure that David gets a chance to wave there. Thank you very much. We've also got Zoltan Saki, I hope I'm saying that surname correctly, and he's co-founder of Citizen Wolf. Now, Citizen Wolf combines algorithms and on-demand manufacturing to create the future of fashion, which is basically made to measure, ethical, and planet-friendly. They have a proprietary Magic Fit technology, which automates tailoring at scale using biometrics such as height, weight, age, and bra size. And I guess it's from the sounds of it, and I'm sure Zoltan will speak to this, sounds a bit like the old Shoes of Prey model. We've also got Dylan Mulan, and he's the founder and director of Happy Skin Company. And they're experts in all things beauty technology. So they're the home of the world's #1 at-home IPL hair removal handset. They definitely understand the intimate process of hair removal and how intimate that can be, and they don't take it lightly. So one of the nice things about Dylan, I think, that he brings to the table is that he's obviously got a smaller product range, and as a result of that, he's got a unique perspective on e-commerce in the digital market space. We've also got Mac Wang. He's the head of Australia and New Zealand for Stripe. Stripe's a technology and payments company. They build economic infrastructure for the internet, and they work with businesses of every size, right from startups to public companies. And those companies use their payment gateway and other payments infrastructure to accept online payments, run technically sophisticated financial ops in more than 100 countries. We also are very lucky to have David Ching with us, and he's head of Australia for Geekplus. And Geekplus is a global technology company which works specifically in the intelligent logistics space. So they apply advanced robotics, AI tech, etc., to basically implement flexible, reliable, and efficient solutions for warehouses, factories, supply chain management. So we've got people across, I guess, infrastructure, payments, and e-com and digital retail. And so really looking forward to having these guys give us their thoughts on what we're discussing today. So thanks, everybody, for joining the panel. We'll jump straight in, and as you put just for the audience, a bit of housekeeping, as you put your questions into the platform, into the Seamless platform, Paul will be aggregating those, and then at the end, we'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end. We'll save about 10 minutes at the end of the questions. So we'll have about roughly 50 minutes with the panelists and answering and asking questions amongst the panelists, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end. So get your questions in via the Seamless platform, and Paul will aggregate those and get those through to us towards the end of the session. So I guess, the elephant in the room is COVID. So really what I'd like to discuss, I guess, straight out of the gate is how has COVID affected e-commerce growth in Australia from your perspective? Are customers behaving differently now? Obviously, we know that online shopping has gone ballistic, particularly with lockdowns, et cetera. But for you guys in the trenches, particularly, I'm thinking through the retail lens of David, Zoltan, and Dylan. What have you seen as COVID has really started to bite over the last 18 months?
Happy to start if you'd like, Jason.
That'd be great. Thanks, David.
So yeah, pretty monumental year of change, 2020. 57% growth in e-commerce just across that 1 year. So, I mean, we really didn't expect to see that till about 2024. So huge numbers coming across. And if you look at the recent Australia Post report, I think they're reporting that we spent about $50 billion online here in Australia. So we're at about 16% of total retail sales. And specifically, I can only speak from experience in our vertical. We saw insatiable demand for everything home furnishings, or everything home, really. Anything DIY, anything home, really went crazy. So COVID clearly kept us at home. We've seen shoppers investing in their homes in record numbers, and all of a sudden, everyone wanted to become a decorator and a designer. It was a bit like the whole of Australia playing the block, essentially. And it's created new shopping routines. I think that's the most notable trend, really, is that the brands that delivered a great customer experience through that enormous growth that we all had will now get the repeat purchases coming through. And that routine change will serve as the basis of the new normal that everyone's talking about. So overall, from where we sit, the shift has been very, very strong. But what's been the most interesting is that the persistence of the growth, even post the lockdowns, and with physical stores reopening, it really hasn't slowed down certainly from where I sit. So we think there's been a massive change, and in my view, it's not just temporary; it is an enduring change.
That's fantastic. Maybe Dylan, maybe you can jump in here as well. Obviously, with everybody doing Zoom calls, especially during lockdowns, et cetera, people may not have been particularly below the belt line. They may not have been as conscious of what they looked like or all that sort of stuff. So, from your perspective, have you seen COVID impact your business in a negative way, a positive way? What's that growth look like? It seems to be very sector driven and very vertically driven. Some verticals did exceptionally well, and other verticals got absolutely killed. Obviously, athleisure did very well. Traditional, upmarket fashion didn't do as well because people were staying at home a lot more. So it was very vertical specific. So maybe you guys can speak to some of the other verticals that you guys play in.
Yeah, so obviously I'm in the beauty space, and more specifically the at-home DIY beauty space. So for us, obviously, initially COVID had a crazy effect in our business. And the point you made about people not necessarily going out as much as they were, or feeling like they have to keep up with their beauty routines. People were locked in at home for their houses nearly 24/7. So people were bored. They were looking for any excuse or anything they could do, like David was saying, DIY, home renos or gardening or anything they could do inside their beauty routine. But for us, it exploded massively, because if you look at our core product, and we do have a little bit larger product range now. We have 8 to 10 products, but our core product is an at-home IPL hair removal handset. And around the world, almost instantly, beauty salons and laser clinics all shut overnight like that. So then we'd been in business now for over 3 years, so we had already converted a lot of those people over. But there was a certain part of that market that were just happy going to laser clinics, and they wanted to do it that way. When that was no longer an option, we became the brand that everyone ran to. So we probably had about 4 months solid of sales that were bigger than Christmas period. So we had about 4 months of Christmas sales, which was awesome as a business. Obviously, there were so many other businesses who were struggling. For us, we had a very positive effect in terms of demand, but at the same point, our products are electronic products, so they're manufactured in China. We had a by far increased demand, but our challenge was supply chain. Our manufacturer were only actually shut, so they're in Shenzhen, which is down near Hong Kong. They were only shut for about 3 weeks. So that didn't kill us. What killed us was when Australia Post, DHL, everyone had to prioritize sending over sanitizer and PPE. So we actually had stock sitting in DHL's warehouse in Australia for 2-3 weeks before it could get cleared. And we're 5 minutes from the airport. That stock was right there, but we couldn't get it. So that was the challenge for us. It obviously pushed all of e-commerce forward. Like, it was going to get to this point, but there are so many people, not just specific to us, that they may have been the baby boomers or older generations who hadn't had their first online shopping experience. And now they were forced to do that. They might have thought it was scary, or they didn't trust the internet. And then once they started having these experiences, now that retail's opening back up, sure, a lot of them will go into in-store and make their purchases, but they now feel comfortable with that. And of course, for us, we couldn't have Black Friday and Christmas sale numbers the whole time. We noticed a massive spike, and then it kind of normalized. And there was a little period of about probably 2 to 3 weeks. It was at different points in the US and Australia when people started to realize, oh crap, like, I'm running out of money. Where's my next paycheck going to come from? So numbers did get quiet for probably 2 to 3 weeks before we went into peak sales Q4 last year. But now it's been back to normal, and I only see it continuing to grow.
Awesome. Thanks for the insights. Really appreciate that. That was really awesome. Zoltan, maybe you can just throw just a couple minutes in there from your perspective as well, because obviously you know, the I guess the fashion vertical was heavily affected.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me, by the way, today. Look, COVID is everyone has a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. Like Dylan, we were very lucky. We came out of it very net positive. We doubled the business last year, which was phenomenal. And it's interesting to hear somebody else in a completely different vertical speak about virtually the exact same things that affected us. Although the difference was we make everything right here in Sydney. So for those who don't know, Citizen Wolf is basically re-engineering the way clothes are made at scale to save our planet. And that means that we make, at the moment, we have one product, which is a made-to-measure t-shirt. It's carbon negative, and it's obviously custom fit to your body. Now, we make everything right here in Sydney. We created our own factory, and we use most of our fabric, about 84% of our fabric is actually knitted in Melbourne. So we have a very local supply chain, which is great. And up until COVID, it was, you know, it was nice in theory, but it didn't really mean too much. But then obviously, as the rest of our vertical got shut down, most of their supply chain is OS, specifically in China. And there was a lot of media attention around, you know, locally made goods. And we rode the coattails of that, because people started searching for made in Australia, XYZ, didn't really matter what it was, as a result of these supply chain issues that Dylan outlined. So that was great for us. We were ready, we were primed, we were in the right place at the right time, and we were just able to ride that growth, which was amazing. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention with relation to COVID specifically was that what we've found in our product, or in our vertical, I guess, is that price sensitivity went away to a degree. So we're not cheap. You know, we make everything here in Australia. We're ethically accredited, and of course, it's tailor-made to fit your body. So buying one of our t-shirts is not like going to Kmart or Uniqlo or something like that. So we're obviously a lot more expensive than some of the alternatives, but obviously the benefits of the way we work, it's really hard to explain them online. It's hard when you can't touch the fabric. It's hard to know that we actually have a more premium product. And of course, if you've never had anything made, custom made, tailor made in the past, it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around just how different that makes you feel. So for us, getting people in the first time is super important. And COVID was excellent in that sense, because you couldn't go out, the pubs were shut, the fancy restaurants were shut. People just couldn't spend their money if they were lucky enough to still have their job. You know, they just didn't have those outlets to spend their money. I know everybody was shopping online for homewares, that withstanding. What we saw is that basically people were a little bit less price sensitive perhaps than they used to be, matched with desire to spend money in Australia on an Aussie made product where possible. And yeah, we were just in the right place at the right time.
Nice. And did you find that the COVID-induced nationalism helped too? So, sort of trying to want to support local businesses, local manufacturing, all that sort of stuff. We saw that definitely in New Zealand, and I know a lot of Australian businesses saw similar. Basically, if you made something in Australia and you were sort of almost an artisan type of business, that there was a lot of nationalism around wanting to support local businesses and local tradespeople and kind of local everything, right? So did you benefit from that wave as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's safe to say that like not many clothes get made in Australia. I think it's like very low single digits of our kind of total supply gets actually made here. So it's really lovely because we're really passionate about keeping the industry here, keeping jobs here, keeping manufacturing in Australia. But it's, it's hard when we're competing with things that are made in China or Bangladesh and they're selling at, a fraction of the price for obvious reasons. So COVID was great in that sense that people were starting to interrogate supply chains, I guess, not at an academic level, but at well, hang on, if they make this in Bangladesh and it costs $10, how is anyone actually getting paid? How is that fair? So yeah, I think net that was really good for us.
Awesome. Thanks, team. Really appreciate that. Appreciate the insights. If we look at if we look at scaling, right? And I think all of you, because you were all effectively startups at some point, and some of you are sort of kind of still in that sort of startup model and really aggressively going after market share. How do you look at scaling up your brand in Australia? Is it about purely having the biggest range, or is there more to it than that? And I think if we look at Dave from an ops and logistics perspective, and then maybe Dylan from a small product range perspective, maybe you can help us understand, from a scaling perspective, what are the ways in which businesses in Australia can really start to scale, particularly from an e-commerce ops perspective, as that, online demand. Businesses with COVID saw, when the lockdowns happened, they went from maybe they were doing 80% of business through a store estate if they were an omni-channel business, and then they literally overnight went to doing 100% of their revenue through e-com. And a lot of businesses realized, hey, we're just not operationally ready to do 100% of our revenue through e-com. What does that look like, I guess, from an ops and logistics perspective, but also from a ranging perspective? Maybe Dave and Dylan could speak to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Actually, it is foreseeable that the sales from your e-com channel will contribute a big portion of your total sales, which means that sometimes will pose a potential risk to your supply chain. That we have to ask ourselves, do we have enough capacity to handle the growth of orders to be packed at your warehouse? So if we do not have enough capacity to fulfill the online orders and delay the lead time, actually the client will just switch to another platform to buy what they want to buy. So it will actually hurt your branding. So in order to handle the massive growth in e-commerce channel, full manual operation is no longer an option to cope with the surging orders and the wide product range. So we cannot forever add operators to deal with the surging orders, but we can actually utilize, and a lot of the e-retailer e-commerce player in Australia is utilizing the flexible automation solution to deal with the surging orders. So with the help of the flexible automation, we can reduce the tedious work of the process for the operator at the warehouse to fulfill the order. For example, traditionally, operator, they have to walk around and search an item in operation, those are the non-value added activities. And by having the automation in your warehouse, you can just let the robot search and bring the items to the operator pick. So we can actually use the robot to work for you.
Yeah. And are you seeing, sorry, just before we move on to Dylan, are you seeing any market shift in terms of owned warehouses, owned operated warehouses, where a retailer needs to obviously have their own OMS and WMS warehouse management system to manage this, and obviously their own hardware with robotics, such as you say, carousels, pick, pack, dispatch capability, all that sort of stuff? Or are you seeing businesses shifting to either a hybrid model or a fully outsourced 3PL, 4PL model for logistics and fulfillment? Or are they effectively to handle that kind of overflow and handle those peaks in demand? Are they going to a more hybrid model where that, yep, they still have owned warehouse and logistics, but maybe they'll work with a 3PL, 4PL for overflow?
Yeah. Actually, it depends, because it depends which model do the retailer or the e-commerce player they want to choose. Some of them, they will use the 3PL, and some of them will use their own operation warehouse, because it depends like on their scale and the future plan of the business. So some of them will, some of the e-commerce player, especially for some large player in the market, they will own their own warehouse, like they will invest in the automation by themselves, because they can actually own the asset. But when they are going to a 3PL sector, actually they're using the service of the 3PL, so the 3PL will buy for them. So it depends on which way the retailers want to go.
Yep, makes absolute sense. Dylan, your thoughts?
Well, I'll touch on that point and share what my experience has been. Then I'll go into maybe scale and in terms of product offering more from the marketing point of view. But for us, we've had that same consideration many times. Do we go 3PL? Do we continue doing everything from our warehouse? And still to this day, all of our orders are shipped from our warehouse in Sydney, internationally and domestic. We're only now, when we've done costing exercises, looking at comparing what it would cost to send our stock there, the management fees, the pick pack fees and their rates. And every single time for us as a brand, where we have always been better off from a cost perspective and a control perspective to continue managing all of our own operations and sending it all out from our own warehouse. So that's what's worked for us. But as I said, we have a smaller SKU count, so it's much easier to manage. If I had 100 products plus, we probably would have moved over to a 3PL system. And then for us, in terms of scale and looking at large product lines, I don't think it's necessary at all, particularly if you're a startup and you're someone starting a business with not a whole lot of upfront investment or capital or even experience. Like, we started the business with a total initial investment of $20,000. That was it, right? Including our stock, including our marketing budget. And we scaled that to 15 million with one product, not two, not three. With one product, we scaled that to 15 million. And now, even now, 90 to 95% of our business is still our at-home IPL hair removal handset. So it's not about how many products you have. That's one method, the way that we've been able to do it. It's product to market fit. Is the product you're doing now something the market actually needs? Are you actually solving a problem? Or are you going into a space that's already super competitive? I just think there's too many people that will start a business if it's your first one, and I'll try and go in and compete and, okay, I'm going to make another face cream. When you're going in, there's thousands of face creams, right? You need to try, if you can, get into a product or a category that's new or emerging and get that market share then. And in terms of scaling, it's all about your mindset towards scale. So traditionally, and I've tried to work with agencies in the past, or I've brought on marketing managers that have traditional agency experience, and they'll be, okay, what's our budget for the month? And let's just say we want to spend, for argument's sake, $100,000 on Facebook for the month. We'll be sitting halfway through that month and we've spent $50,000. And our ROI is sitting at a 10, whereas so many traditional marketers will be like, okay, that's awesome. We'll ride out this month and we're going to finish really strongly. Where for me, and why a lot of e-com brands that have started have been able to scale so quickly, it's okay. As soon as you realize something's working, you make the decision to push as much budget into those campaigns or those products that you can. And only as that ROAS starts to dip to the point where you know you're better to actually pull back, you push. And that's the way you find scale, not by sitting on your budgets for the month and then reevaluating. So you find something that's winning, you have to be prepared and willing to shift budget and to go aggressively on that. That's how all these brands with young founders have started with, $10, $20, $30, $40,000 and turned it into tens of millions in a matter of a couple of years. It's the mindset towards scaling those products and those campaigns.
So you're effectively saying no sacred cows, and be prepared to pivot quickly, and particularly obviously with the death of third-party cookies and the likely, ad cost inflation is likely to go through the roof as third-party cookies die, and there's a bigger emphasis on zero and first-party data. I think your advice becomes even more salient under that environment where the cost of acquisition is going through the roof. You have to be able to allocate funds to performance marketing that's actually generating the best ROAS, as opposed to saying, hey, we're trying to shotgun approach across our entire range. Now, it's a little bit easier in your case because you've got a smaller range, but even for bigger businesses, I think it makes sense to, because you're going to have those peaks and troughs regardless of your range. You're going to have peaks and troughs one-offs of sales of specific products or specific ranges, and it makes sense to stay on top of that and reallocate funds to the high-performing ads versus the underperforming products, just for the sake of making sure it stays in front of people's faces.
Yeah, and that's why it's important as well to diversify the channels. If you're too over-reliant on Facebook and Instagram, if that starts to dip, then you're screwed. Your whole business is relying on one key partner and one key platform. So diversify as many platforms as you can. Even if you add a new platform and that's adding 10% or 15%, that can really help if other platforms start to dip. And if you can find 2 or 3 or 4 new platforms over the next 6 to 12 months to give you an extra 25 to 50% revenue top line, and you're doing that obviously profitably, then that's another really good way that we've been able to find scale and continue to grow.
Awesome. Thanks. Just shifting gears a little bit here. If we start thinking about the payment journey, right, for customers, and we say, look, how important is that? How important is payments to the customer experience and customer journey? And for example, we see new buy now, pay later platforms. It feels like almost every day there's a new platform that comes out. Afterpay obviously crushing it, Zip and Klarna and all the other buy now, pay later services. There's a lot of them out there, and as I said, it seems to be happening all the time. We look at Afterpay. They've recently done deals with Stripe and Adyen to bundle Afterpay into those payment gateways to capture more customers. Sorry about that. It's my dog. Sorry about that. So to capture customers more easily. And do you think there's something like a merchant fatigue for new payment methods? Because obviously buy now, pay later has high costs associated with it, but it's also an acquisition channel for a lot of brands. Is there customer fatigue around the plethora of payment options available to them? Or are we seeing, hey, an even split? If a merchant offers 5 different payment methods, are we seeing a relatively even split of usage between those payment methods? And how do you manage those costs of BNPL versus, say, for example, other payment methods? So maybe, Mac, obviously you're right hot in that space from a Stripe perspective, and obviously that recent deal with Afterpay was a pretty big announcement by Stripe. And maybe from a retail perspective, so maybe we'll turn it over to Mac first, and get your thoughts on that, and then maybe a retailer perspective as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think even to start, just stepping back to the conversation so far, I've just found it's really great just to, some of the themes have been super interesting across just what parts of your infrastructure do you get stretched when this sort of growth happens? Whether it's 50% and hundreds of percent, it's incredible, and something we really thought about last year as we were onboarding 10,000 new merchants in Australia, and we're handling 5,000 requests a second given to growth. So, it's just super interesting how many different parts of the business gets pushed, and how to make sure you're actually going through that scaling journey so that, you don't drop things as you go along. And I think there's a consistent piece when you think about it. I think Dylan's point on flexibility and adaptability is really a great point. When you talk about payment methods, which is something we think about around how do we help a business build what they want, is we actually sometimes think about how money is inherently local, which I think you firstly think about in a geographic sense, but I actually think it really applies to a segment sense. And so some payment methods make a ton of sense for some segments, but it might not make sense for another segment. And making sure you think through that about what your customer wants, and making sure you're providing the experience that is going to help them convert. I'm always surprised at how much abandonment you see. The checkout is part of the experience, and I don't others have experience in this, but in store, everything's so fine tuned to the feeling you get as you walk in, to what you look at, and how you're going to get taken through there from a person to person experience. And it's great to see how much thought goes into that online, and I think how you pay is fundamentally part of that. I think there's 2 things we've seen, and then I'd love to hear actually from others. I think they've got the choice to work through, but 2 things we see a lot of is the digital wallets as well, especially given how much activity is happening on mobile. So being at Apple Pay and Google Pay, where you're actually getting details out of them as well and taking steps out of the checkout, and just and then also getting the payment and moving on. And I think you're spot on with buy now, pay laters, especially in Australia. It's obviously great that we're innovating and taking that globally, but also how if you're actually adding them, how that experience is really seamless for merchants, where it's like, do you have to go through like different onboarding steps, do other integrations, or is it like fully bundled in, which is something we've been really conscious of as we add payment methods, where you basically, should be able to click a button and just add it. So yeah, I'd love to open up to the other guys. Like, I think that's where I think we've seen a lot of activity and shift in the last period of time.
I think, sorry, just before we jump into the retailers, one of the things that I think is relevant to you, and it's a question for you, I think one of the things Stripe does particularly well, and I do recommend Stripe quite a bit, in my consulting work, tokenized payment gateway. There's still surprisingly quite a few gateways that are not tokenized. They don't offer a saved credit card service. That shows up in the increased interchange fees because it's looked at, saved card is looked at as a recurring payment, whereas a one-off payment is charged at a much higher interchange rate. Combined with the CX improvement of having saved credit card details, I'm constantly surprised at the number of payment gateways out there that don't do vaulting, but somebody like a Stripe and a few of the others, they do. And so for me, I guess, you guys are the underlying platform technology for Shop Pay through Shopify. And obviously they have a vaulted system that runs across all Shopify stores. So that, decreases friction quite dramatically at checkout. If you've shopped on one Shopify store, for all intents and purposes, you shopped on them all in terms of payment friction reduction, right? So I'd love to know kind of what your sense is, and again, from the retailers, where this is all headed, because if we look at Fast and we look at some of the other checkout options that kind of hijack the checkout, and that doesn't work with a lot of SaaS platforms, there's a lot of shift in kind of, and then the introduction of when you look at subscription models and everything else, there's big changes happening in the checkout space, full stop, and payments are a big part of that. So it feels like the more seamless of an experience you can provide via the payment services that you offer, and obviously the BNPL services are similar in the sense that, once you're in their system, and you don't have to re-input all those details every time. You effectively, they recognize you, right? So, what do you think in terms of the reduction of friction? Where do we go next? And are you constantly surprised too that vaulting is not as universal as a lot of people think it is?
Yes on vaulting and tokenizing. I think that's like, it is one of the like almost, I don't want to say it's straightforward, but we do try to make it really easy. Either it's using checkout, or if you're using Shopify, it works with Shopify Pay, or if you're building something really customized, where like that should be thought of, because if you're, I think returning customers was talked about earlier, like that, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to have a great second experience as well as the first experience. The other part I actually think that really builds into, and I'm not sure if anyone's started experimenting with other models, but once you start like saving cards, you're bored basically at like a SaaS kind of world. And so, is there actually a model where you can actually make recurring payments or subscriptions part of the actual product? And of course, recurring is an incredible business model. And so whether that's like, the classic kind of shipping things once a month, or of course, software does it for like software services as well. But we've seen a lot of interest in those kind of experimentation of new models, and marketplaces are another version that gets a bit more extreme. To your point of like, where is it all going? I do think like there's always options. So I think a lot of it is led by what's going to be a great experience. And so I think actually, listening to where customers are kind of heading and what they want. And I think, cards are heavy, and making sure that tokenization or saving is like secure and done. I think that's something that's really important as well. Like, we don't want cards, out in the industry and, fraud becoming more of an issue. And in general, I think Australia's done a pretty good job on fraud. And so I'd expect there to be, hopefully there's continued innovation, but I think Australia is good at finding the right balance between kind of stability on one hand, but also, buy now, pay later being a good example of innovation, and mobile wallets. So I think there'll be more, but I think it's anchored around kind of things we've seen so far.
Awesome. David and Zoltan, perhaps either one of you want to kind of pick up and run with this thinking around payments and proliferation of payment methods, and reduce friction around payments and offering everything a customer wants, but having to think about how do we get this integrated into our platform, and how do we think about modeling out the costs associated with each payment method, etc. Do you want to maybe provide your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to say a few things on payments. Firstly, our approach has always been to obviously have as many offerings as possible to reduce the friction as much as possible towards purchase. That's the starting point. So Mac, we've obviously used Stripe for quite a while, and thanks for looking after us. It's been a great experience. Our approach to buy now, pay later has been to go with the two big guys, so Afterpay and Zip. But over the last couple of months, we're getting emailed daily from the likes of OpenPay, Klarna, and what's I think quite interesting in that space is that there's a real price war emerging. So we had a call with Afterpay during the week, and they're sort of holding firm on their rate, but then we've seen Zip, for example, almost half their rate to us. So that's a really interesting dynamic, and I think it does, when you're in the position of a retailer, it does really force you to think, well, if I can save 2.5% on a transaction, maybe I should start to limit the options a little bit. So we're trying to go through that process at the moment. The digital wallets have been very, very popular. So Apple Pay and Google Pay, we're seeing a lot of payments come through on that. But for us, one of the guiding, I guess, decision-making aspects is also just limits. So we're quite a high AOV purchase. So we are somewhat constrained by what we can and can't offer. But what I would say is they are going hell for leather at the moment, the buy now, pay later players, and it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think before I turn it over to Zolan, I agree with you. I think that there's going to be, we kind of have, it's almost like marketplaces, right? So we've got an explosion of marketplaces. It seems like one's launching every day. We had an explosion of daily deals websites over, a few years ago, and then they retrenched and almost all of them went out of business. And now we got one or two. Payments exploding, payment options exploding, BNPL exploding. And I fully expect there to be some rationalization in the space at some stage. So maybe over to Zoltan for your thoughts.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm just echoing what David said. I completely agree. It's kind of crazy, the buy now, pay later space here in Australia. And yeah, from the merchant's perspective, very much the same. We've limited ourselves just to the two big guys, Afterpay and Zip. And frankly, we're not interested in integrating anything else because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. But again, I think it comes back to who's your customer and knowing that person really well. So most of our customers are a little bit older, certainly older than buy now, pay later was always associated with. They all have credit cards. They're all super comfortable with credit cards, and they just want to pay on credit card. And that's fine, because that's our customer. And so whilst we offer the buy now, pay later services, not that many people in our business actually take them up. It's under 10%. So it's nice to have them because it does reduce friction for certain people, and it does obviously make it easier on a slightly higher priced item. But I think whether or not you choose to integrate it, just go back to who is your customer, know that person really well, and really understand if that's something that's going to motivate them or not. The other thing about SaaS and sort of recurring revenue streams that Mac brought up, like that is the holy grail. I think for any retailer that's not an online, software service, getting to recurring is what you want to do. We've tested it in the past. It's just never really stuck, and which is strange because once you've shopped with us and we've made you something and it perfectly fits your body, getting it again is already really easy. So getting it on subscription, it just seems like the kind of thing that makes sense. But we tried. I think we probably didn't execute it perfectly, or not even close to perfectly. So we'll try again in the future. But again, it just comes down to whether or not your product is something that people want to get on subscription. And if it is, great. There's no better business model, as Max said. But if it's not, maybe there's another way to kind of allow them to get what they want, but it's not quite a subscription. And what's that interesting halfway house? And yeah, we're still experimenting.
Yeah, it's really interesting on that one. I agree with you on that. It depends how people want to behave. But I think combining with Jason's question on saved cards, I think the other thing we've seen is people, how easy can you make it someone make that second purchase? So like if you're going to actually, EDM and promote to them, it's like borderline, if you click out of that, you're making the purchase, as opposed to you have to go through the checkout again. Like we've seen a few of them, especially where it's known, it's like a repeat purchase effectively. So it gives you some flexibility once you've done that sort of stuff. Actually, one question now that we've mentioned on buy now, pay later, have anyone experienced the acquisition side of the equation? Because I think that's one of the things you obviously hear a lot talked about there, where they actually become demand generating. Have you kind of seen that, even if it's a relatively small portion? You mentioned, Zoltan, for you, where that's like they're so entrenched in that ecosystem that it's actually like, they can bring customers as well.
Yeah, look, we haven't really found that, but then we're not promoted via sort of Afterpay in their marketplace or anything. That's something that I've been meaning to look into, but it's just on the list of things to do. So I can't really speak to it, but maybe David and Dylan have something to add there.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in on this one because I think we're the opposite to you, Zoltan. We're very different. Our product, our market is mainly between 18 to 34. So Afterpay is very, very big for us in Australia. It's close to 50% of our customers take on buy now, pay later, and we only offer Afterpay. We looked into Zip early days, and just in terms of who our buyer was and the speed and that they want to go through that process, and the price points of our products are all around that couple $100 mark. Afterpay was the best fit for us, and they've always looked after us in terms of those. Whenever they have those Afterpay day sales, it's a massive couple of weeks for us right around them. And it's not just me, it's other businesses in a similar space in beauty or fashion who have like a high percentage of millennial buyers. It's massive for us. And even in the US, when Afterpay launched there, it was probably 25% of our purchases, and now it's getting up closer to 35%, onwards up to 40%. So for our space, it's very different. Buy now, pay later is very important, and Afterpay, their calendar events and then promoting us is always contributes to us quite significantly.
And just to add to that, to what Dylan was saying, is I think that's the way that they're trying to differentiate now. Is we've had a lot of conversations around cross promotion and how Afterpay can push us on the platform. And if the implication obviously is that the rates aren't going to come down the way we'd like, but they will give us exposure across social media, across EDMs, and that helps. It definitely helps.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'm going to kind of combine two questions into one, and I'll lob this off to Dave initially. So when we start thinking about differentiation and trying to differentiate yourself from your competition, now the three, you three retailers that we're talking to now, you don't have as much of a challenge with that because you've niched down, you're manufacturing, to order, you're doing in-house design. So it's highly curated kind of a range out of the box anyway. You can't just get it from anywhere. It's not just another widget retailer that they can buy it from 10 other competitors of yours. But maybe from a differentiation perspective, and oftentimes retailers will say, well, unless I can offer the lowest price and the fastest delivery, then I can't compete. But clearly there's more to the equation than just low prices and fast delivery. There has to be, otherwise it's a constant race to the bottom. But from, I guess, an ops logistic perspective and some of the other differentiating factors such as curation, hyper curation, exclusive ranges, things like that. Dave, can you give your thoughts about how you can start differentiating from competition in, because even if you don't have direct competition, you have vertical based competition, right? So there's always competition one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to be a unique player in the market, we have to have a supply chain ready, because most of the case, price and delivery time are quite critical to the success of the e-commerce. But how can we achieve that? Is we have to look for a different solution to lower the logistic costs while not sacrificing the delivery time to a customer. So traditionally, some of the e-retailer or e-commerce player, they will invest in a traditional automation system in their warehouse, but that will require them at least 5 to 7 years payback. And a lot of the warehouse player hesitate to invest. But nowadays, we can actually provide a flexible robotic solution like AMR that we heard from our experience. The average ROI, return on investment, is just like 2 to 3 years, and there is a low single point of failure that it won't stop your operation when there are function of a single robot. So with the help of the AMR, we can actually help the e-retailer or e-commerce player to lower their overall logistic costs and increase the delivery time. So supply chain is definitely one of the differentiation that we can bring to the market and to the customer. So it is essential because it is essential for the e-commerce company to dispatch the right quantity of product at the right time to the right customer. So supply chain is actually the backbone of the e-commerce. So a quick, streamlined and secure supply chain is the critical aspect of the e-commerce businesses. By automating the order fulfillment process can reduce the order cycle time, reduce operating costs, and reduce the error in order processing to achieve like 99.99% of the picking accuracy. So I think this can differentiate you from the competition.
Thanks. I totally agree with you. I think obviously in this age of, hey, I expect it yesterday, basically I expect a retailer to both read my mind and get me my product basically by drone if necessary. So I think obviously there's this model, and a lot of the international players have pushed this model hard where, it's same day delivery or next day delivery or whatever the case may be. So I definitely think internal logistics, efficiency, and cost reduction, but also value prop for the end customer is such a critical piece. And you've got to look at the entire supply chain, both inbound and outbound goods. But I think, if we can kind of turn it over to the retailers, obviously you three have engineered your businesses specifically for differentiation. Like that's kind of the foundation of how you've built your businesses, right? So you didn't go into a Me Too space, but even in the Me Too kind of space, I think we're seeing brands try to differentiate. I mean, even if we look at grocery where they have house brands, right? Where they try to, compete against the major suppliers for every product or every popular product. So can you help us maybe think about what your mindset was when you entered into the market and how other businesses can adopt elements of that mindset of differentiation instead of just going into a red water scenario, a red ocean scenario? You obviously want to go as best you can into a blue ocean scenario where there isn't 1,000 competitors out of the gate, right? So how do you think about differentiation from a mindset perspective first, and then how do you execute on that?
I'll jump in. So yeah, I think it's a great question. Thinking about it's one thing, executing it is something else entirely. But when we started, we were really clear. The world didn't need another fashion brand, right? Just quite simply, it didn't need it, and it didn't need another t-shirt brand either. So we were really cognizant of that, and we knew that we couldn't just come to market with another sort of t-shirt. And that really drove everything that Citizen Wolf has become. So every single garment we make is made on demand. It's made to measure. It's absolutely unique to the customer. And so we side-skirt a lot of the issues that Dave was outlining, because when people have some kind of input into whatever that product might be, what that obviously buys us is not only the retailer, but the manufacturer is a bit of time. And so people don't expect us to dispatch on the same day. We just don't have that worry. And they're more than happy to wait. And if they have to wait 3 days or 5 days or 7 days, it kind of doesn't matter. Obviously, the faster we can do it, the better. And we're running tests all the time to see whether speed impacts repeat purchase. But that's kind of slightly different. But yeah, I think the differentiation that we bring is simply that you can create the perfect t-shirt for you. So you choose the material, you choose the style, you can edit the style if you want. And then we make it incredibly simple to make it tailor-made to custom fit your body. You outlined at the start, Jason, our magic fit algorithm, all we need is height, weight, age, and then for women, bra. And with those 3 or 4 data points, we basically can create something that's 94% accurate based on your body and completely custom fit. So yeah, we just don't play in the same space that other retailers do. But I think you make a good point. If you're just trying to sell something that you can buy anywhere else, and on Amazon, especially now, you know, that's a really difficult space to play in. And frankly, price is the only game in town. Like, you want it to be cheaper, you want it to be faster. Maybe there's a little bit of interplay there and you can prioritize one over the other. But yeah, I would say from our experience, you know, the more you can customize it for the customer, the more leeway you buy yourself.
For us as well, our experience, we moved into a market. We weren't the first at-home IPL device ever created. There were brands that had them stocked, large electronic brands that had them stocked as one of their 100 plus electronics that they ranged. They were sitting at the bottom shelf of a shaver shop and places like that, but nobody really knew about them. So we were for a lot of people, particularly in Australia and the US, we were the first company that anyone ever saw advertising these products. So people thought we invented the technology and we created it. So initially we didn't have that problem. So we were just all about growth, getting our brand in front of as many people as we could. Where the challenge started to come in, being an electronic product, you know what it's like these days with IP and things getting copied and created. And so probably about 12 to 18 months in, we started seeing a lot of competitors pop up that had purchased our product, created molds that looked the same, and were selling things that looked very similar. It still happens to this day. And being a young entrepreneur, being first time in business, it kind of gets to you a little bit, and it takes a little bit too much of your energy. So every day I'm spending half my day doing takedowns and IP and like worrying too much about what our competition was doing. And that was actually taking away from us focusing on who we are, what our USP was in the market, because at the start we had the whole market to ourselves, and that was great. Now that all these brands are coming in, there's so many things that we have uniquely that they do not have. So we needed to not worry about that, what they were doing. If they continue to copy us, they're always going to be behind us. So we need to focus on our, 3 or 4 key USPs that only we could offer. And that was going to set us instead, because in a good stead, because we were not going to play the pricing game with them. We cannot. These products that they're selling, I don't know. We've purchased some of the competing products and we've pulled them apart and looked at technology, and they are really not something that you'd want to be putting on your body, particularly anything with IPL or laser. That's not something you want to go cheap on it. So we looked at that from a cost perspective. We're never going to reduce our cost in our manufacturing of our products, because it's going to reduce the quality. And look, we do, being in the e-com space, we will participate in the big key sale dates, and that's great. And that's always a big boost for us. But if we're never going to go as aggressive in the pricing as these other guys, that's not the way we want to run our business. So a couple little other things that you can do that doesn't necessarily have to mean you drop your prices, but things that can, if you're selling online, it is a very competitive space. What you can do, what we've found that has been able to distinguish us and give people another reason, that's things like if you can offer personalization. Obviously your whole business ultimately is around personalization, but things like if you can get people's initials on them or a message that they create, and you can put that on your products. Exclusive gifting, so not for purchase products, depending on what people buy. Exclusive gifting around certain promotions, that always works really well for us, and we're not having to discount heavily when we're offering that. So that distinguishes us. And then things for our space, like, okay, what can you offer in terms of post-purchase support for the customer journey that your competitors aren't? Things like money-back guarantees. And like for us, we have a dedicated results team. Like if you're going to get hair removal, laser, IPL done in a clinic, you'll be able to speak to your clinician, your beautician every time. And we actually offer the same experience for our customers. We have a dedicated support channel where they can go in, they can speak to our team and say, okay, I'm doing this, my hair is this, my hair is that, what should I be doing? I'm seeing really good results here, but not in this body part, and give them that. So start looking at other ways you can add value to the customer rather than having to just play that price war. That's what I'd recommend. And there are a few things that we've done, and they've all been really effective.
Thanks very much, guys. I'm going to have to, because we're running short on time. Really appreciate that, Dylan. Really amazing insights. Now I'm going to jump to the questions, some of the questions that have been submitted, and we'll do this sort of rapid fire because we are in the last few minutes. And I'll just select one person to answer this, I think, as a start, and we'll go from there. So first question is for retailers. What do you think about build versus buy in terms of business management software, order management, warehouse management, analytics? I'm guessing they probably are also maybe referring to ERP, etc. So from a business management software, the back office, not so much e-commerce, but back office software, what do you think? Build versus buy? David, go.
Definitely buy. I think there is so much out there now to spend your time trying to develop something in-house and dedicate resources and cost to that. doesn't make any sense. There is a SaaS product for almost anything a retailer or an e-commerce brand would need right now. There is a product out there. So my advice would be look, dig deep, and don't spend time on building.
Totally agree with you. That's exactly my experience as well. Okay, so this is a payments related question, and there's actually two, which we'll kind of combine into one. So how much of an impact can false declines have on cart abandonment? How do we combat that given the increased risk of fraud, due to obviously COVID, driving demand? And then also, how important is the payment experience? How closely should a retailer work with their payment provider to increase auth rates and decrease fraud? So over to you, Mac.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm going to be biased, but I mean, it's part of the experience. So I think it's like imperative to make sure it's a great experience. And, we'd always be happy to kind of engage and share what we can with people to make sure that we're providing a great experience. And I think you'd want to look for that in a partner, as any of the partners that even David mentioned, where, massive +1 on his, like, if you're putting stuff in spreadsheets, it probably means there's a good SaaS product to be built. From a declines and authorization rates point of view, I think from a declines standpoint, the first thing I'd say is actually really look for kind of transparency about what information you're getting, because there's so many different kinds of declines. Sometimes the consumer can control it. If if it's funding, then it's like, hey, you don't have enough in your bank account, and fix it, or use a different payment method, or use a different card. And so I think if anything's getting obfuscated in that process, I'd really look for transparency. And then on auths, we're very conscious of optimizing authorization rates. I think you can actually, depending which markets, it can make a really big difference on, definitely on percentage point, uplift of possible. So I think I'd be looking for that as well in partners, that it's something that they care about, and it's not as simple as I get a card, $1 does or doesn't get charged, and that's it. There's obviously we get excited about actually the details under the hood.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for. I'll hand it back over to Paul. Thank you all for joining me on this panel. It's been an amazing, insightful experience, and really appreciate everybody's time and all the feedback everybody was able to give. Over to Paul.
Thanks very much indeed, Jason, and thank you to all of you. I think this is definitely one of those panels that could have gone on for a lot longer. I'm sorry that we only had the hour, but thank you all of you for sharing, I think, lots of different perspectives, but also some real commonalities around some of the key issues that everybody's facing, and some of the sort of key strategies for success that these guys have employed that you can go back and look at in your own businesses too. So thank you very much to David, Mac, Dylan, Zoltan, and Dave for your insights as panelists. If we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry, we did try and get to as many of them as possible. You can contact the panelists directly through the platform. Just go into the speakers area and you can send them a connection request through there. I know that Mac and Dave both have teams standing by on their exhibition stands as well. If you click into the exhibition hall, you can go and have a chat with some of the team there and talk about some of the issues that they've discussed during this session. Coming up next, we're going back into our channel, so you can choose from our banking channel or our e-commerce strategy channel. But just one more time, thank you so much to all of our panelists. Really great job, and we'll hope to see you all soon. Cheers.